Hey everyone, welcome back to another video where I'll be sharing with you one of the trickiest openings I used as black to reach 2000. And yes, it is a Sicilian, and I know that people recommend usually not to play the Sicilian at lower levels, but honestly this specific opening above, if you're above like 1000 rating, I think it should be fine because there isn't much theory to learn, and even if your opponent strays away, there are a couple of simple ideas here that you can always use. And let's get to it. So white plays e4, obviously c5, and I'll be looking at the open Sicilian specifically. And after a trade, I recommend you play knight f6 first. And the simple idea here is you're immediately putting pressure on the e4 pawn, which is undefended. And there is a trap here, although not too common. If white decides to push the pawn forward and hit the knight with tempo while trying to protect his pawn, you can just play queen a5 check and you hit the king and the e5 pawn. After a move like knight c3, you just grab the pawn with another check and you should just continue your development and go on to convert. So this is a nice trap to have in the back of your mind. That's the point of knight f6 first. And white can continue with knight c3 and you can go knight c6. Now the idea here is pretty simple. You want to play bishop b4 next and pin the knight so you can put pressure on the e4 pawn. And white has a couple options here. Let's say he plays bishop e3, continuing the normal development in Sicilian. You can straight away play bishop b4, and you'll be surprised how many times my opponent played a move like bishop e2, simply overlooking the fact that you pinned his knight and you're threatening to take the e4 pawn. So you're already up a pawn by move 7 and you're putting pressure on the pin piece. So that's a nice thing to know. And another note here is once you take, more often than not, you'll leave white with doubled pawns, and your rook should come to the semi-open c file and start putting lots of pressure here. So this is a really nice position to have. And let's say white doesn't blunder the pawn and plays a move like f3. You can continue to strike with d5, again the main theme of trying to put pressure on e4. And here white has a couple of options. Let's say he takes on d5, you can simply take back with your knight, hitting the c3 knight, which is pinned, and also hitting the undefended e3 bishop. And you'll be surprised how many times I had a couple of opponents who immediately play bishop d2 and they hang their knight on d4. So I just play queen h4 check, provoking g3, another weakness, and then I just take the knight on d4 and I'm already up a piece by move 10. Now of course this won't happen too much, but it's an idea to keep in mind. White has to take here on c6 first, and once you take back, then they play bishop d2. But again, you're actually better here after you play rook b8, simply because this light square diagonal is really weak. You're gonna get in queen b6, targeting this diagonal, and once your queen goes to b6, perhaps even a5 and then later bishop a6 to trade the light squared bishop off. And you'll be looking to castle here and bring your h rook to d8, and again align with white's queen. So the play here is pretty natural, and it's white who has to be really careful. So going back, this is what happens in general when white plays f3, and let's say he plays bishop d3 instead. Again, different moves, same idea. However, you play d5, putting pressure on e4, and again, let's say white takes, you just take back, and let's say they play e5 this time. Now here's a tricky idea I'd like to play. Instead of playing something like knight d7, which is fine, going back and hitting the pawn, I play d4 here. And the idea is once white takes your f6 knight, you take on e3 and you're trying to take, basically trying to open up the king side a bit and make it more weak. Important that you shouldn't take on c3. It would be nice if white continues with f takes g7 so you can take with check and win the rook and all these sorts of stuff, but white can here instead just play b3, and once you take back with the queen here, you are up a pawn, but again there are a lot of weaknesses and white is still in the game. So going back, you take on e3, and once white continues to take on g7, you take with check. Once the king takes, you can play a move like queen d4 check. Again, you take back on g7, and it is equal material, but you're honestly black. I would prefer black here, and it's because you're putting pressure on the pinned piece, and also b2 is weak. Your rook will come to the b8 and it will target the semi-open file. Your queen is eyeing g2, and again this is a really nice position for black to continue playing. So going back, these are a couple of ideas in these positions. Let's say white castles instead after bishop d3. You can play e5, continue to expand your center, and here if white plays a natural move like going back to f3 or something, you can continue with d4, and you're winning a piece here because of the center fork. So white has to take your c6 knight, and once you take back, you get a really nice center here. And let's say white also takes here. I would say objectively white is slightly better, but honestly I'm fine with playing as black here, playing a move like h6, making sure the bishop doesn't come to g5 and annoy you. And if you maintain your center with bishop b7, later ideas of a5, bringing both rooks to the semi-open files on the queen side, trying to put some pressure and maybe slowly push your pawns forward in the center when the time is right. You should be doing fine. And I've had a couple of games here where I slowly outplayed my opponents. I can share them in future videos. And so this is honestly a nice position to have. Going back, this is what usually happens when white plays a move like bishop e3. Now there are of course a couple of other options that I'd like to quickly look at, even though not too common. First is a3, and it's because white has probably faced this sort of setup already before and they don't want to deal with it, so they play a3. And I've had this a couple of times honestly, and you just simply use the tempo to your advantage. You play d5 immediately, and and if white takes back, you just simply take back with your pawn, and nothing too big, it's just an equal position, but white wasted tempo on a3. Or if white tries something special with bishop b5, it's important you play bishop d7 here, but after that honestly it's all fine. And again, if he takes, you take back, and it's nice position. You're gonna develop your bishop castle soon and things should be all right. So that's why you deal with a3. And if knight bd5, trying to play bishop f4 next move, sort of use the dark square diagonal weaknesses, you just continue with your plan with bishop b4. Again, you're pitting the knight, threatening to take. And here, let's say white plays knight d6 check, you can actually bonk cloud, play king e7, and black is surprisingly fine. It's actually equal, and it's white who's under the pump, because here white has to make a choice. Now you're attacking the knight. If he takes on c8, you just take back with the rook, and again you're threatening to take the e4 pawn. And I've had a couple of cases where you get to this position, white has tunnel vision, he just moves his knight 3 times, and now he's like, okay, I should develop my pieces. So he plays a move like bishop e3, and then you can again just take the e4 pawn and you're up a pawn. Let's say he plays a move like bishop d3, however, you just simply play rook e8 and you're gonna manually castle, play d5, and your position is already fine. Rooks are already well placed, and you should be doing nice here. So knight d6 check doesn't really work. Let's say he plays bishop f4 instead, another example line. You can just play e5, again disconnecting the bishop from protecting the knight. Here again, if he plays knight c8, same as before. If he plays knight f5 check, you just go back to f8, and your king is actually fine. And now it's black, it's equal position, but black is the one who's going to start pushing forward, because the bishop is attacked right now, and once white moves, even though you're pinned, you just play d5, and again you're putting pressure on white center. The f5, the light squared bishop eyes the f5 knight, and you're gonna play h6 soon, and the queen is going to develop, and the rook is gonna come to d-file, and meanwhile your king is really fine. And I've had a couple of games where eventually after h6 this trade happens, and I bring the rook to d8, and I also play h5, and then I bring the h8 rook. I basically rook lift it, and the king is fine to leave on f8. So again, these are really nice positions to be had. So dangerous moves like knight db5 are fine in this Sicilian as well, and usually black is doing fine. So going back, lastly, instead of bishop e3, another option is knight c6, and you take with the b pawn, and again you're gonna play d5 next move and get a really nice center. If white plays e5, you can immediately play knight d5, and you're doing fine. If white captures, you just take back this way, and you're gonna try to play queen c7, put pressure on this pawn. If white ever plays f4, then you can play queen b6 and start targeting the weak diagonal. So let's just say a example move like bishop d3, queen c7, f4, and then queen b6, taking advantage of the dark squares, and then you can perhaps play d6 next move or something and also try to chip away at the pawn structure. So this should be a nice position to play. If they play a move like bishop d3, you can get in you can get in d5 immediately, and if they trade, you have a really nice pawn structure. Bishop d7, a5, you develop this dark square bishop castle, and you try to bring the rooks to the c and b files, and again create some sort of play where you can outplay your opponent. Or if they play e5 here, you can again just go back to d7, and usually you'll play a5 and bishop a6 and develop the light squared bishop that way, and just trade it off with white's light squared bishop, which is kind of active. So these are the plans in this sort of Sicilian. As you saw, there are quite a few traps that your opponent can fall into, and also even if white does everything right, you see how usually you get equal positions and you're all fine. Of course, there are a couple of lines which I didn't show, which objectively give white a better position, and if there are enough people who are interested and leave comments or like the video, I'll create another more in-depth video where I cover most of the lines. And honestly, even in those cases, black should be doing fine, honestly, and it's definitely playable below 2000. So definitely give this a try and let me know how it goes, and see you next video. Bye.